Good morning, everyone who's assembled, and welcome to our Arts Forum, Fade to Black on Juneteenth. And so I have the distinct honor of introducing Mr. Errol Anthony Wilkes, who is a board member for Shabak Enterprises and participates with the Fade to Black Festival, which will be coming up in another week. And so I invited him to talk about what Fade to Black is, what it means to our community, and how it connects to Juneteenth. Remembering that the Arts Forum is all about linking arts with social justice. So without further ado, Mr. Errol Anthony Wilkes.
Good morning. A few years ago, might have been 2008, when Mr. Obama got elected, my daughter was a youngster then, and she said to me, if the man was elected in the first or second week of November, why does it take until January to get him inaugurated? And I say, you know, it used to be March. Why would it take that long? I said, okay, picture this. Back then, when the founding fathers came up with this whole idea of the three forms of government and all that, remember, they didn't have the communication systems that they have today. They didn't have Twitter, they didn't have Facebook, they didn't have, not even telegraph then. So when somebody was elected, somebody had to get on a mule, a horse, a donkey, something, and walk the whatever miles this vast country was at the time. And one has to wonder, what would one of those founding fathers were to materialize today? He'd be quite shocked about how quickly, if you spit on the street, somebody knows about it on the television within 2 minutes, you know? So then she asked me, so is it that's the reason why it took so long for the former enslaved to be notified about the Jubilee? And I said, yes, that might have been part of it, but we just did a play, remember, in Juneteenth, and one of the passages talked about this one of the ladies, I can't remember her name, when she was talking about, she heard about the Jubilee from an adjoining county, and part of it was the master had his crops to take care of, so he didn't care about you being free. He just wanted to make sure his crop got to the market. And you know, in an ironic mood, you could probably say, okay, I could see the guy saying that, you know, I'm just going to hang on to my property until somebody forces me to acquiesce. So I say that to say that we now have multiple hundreds of ways of communicating with each other. I've been watching this series on the telly about the presidents and how they shape the country's history. And it's remarkable that the things that we now take for granted, that it wasn't so back then. You could pick up a telephone and you could talk to somebody. You could do, what is that thing? FaceTime now, you know? My dad, it will be 90 in September, and whenever he's talking to my daughter on the phone, I always hear her screaming, Grandpa, hold the phone in front of your face because Dad is still doing this. Yes, hello? So all you see is ears. Grandpa, you know, it's FaceTime, you know? And then some of us who have, you have an iPhone, don't you? And you kind of look down on the people who have the Androids? Yes, yes, yeah. Yes, I see, yeah, you know, I was directing a show over at Texas Southern a few years back, and I had a hard time explaining what a rotary phone was to one of the kids. And there, I brought the phone in, I got it somebody's prop shop. I think I went down to the alley and they loaned me one and I brought it. And they're looking at the thing and they said, okay, Mr. Wilkes. Um, and they looked at it and of course they can't figure out how you could take a picture with it or send a text, you know. So I said, okay, before we even got the phone, I tried to explain to them how to pantomime to dial. And the kid is saying, Mr. Wilkes, I look ridiculous. I said, yeah, but we have to dial 9 numbers, okay? So just keep going. Yeah. You know, some people remember picking up the phone, dialing Beechwood 56789. Call me anytime. Yeah. Yes. And some of us have shown our age by knowing the lyrics to that song. Yeah. Anyway, I was invited here to speak generally about how art and connects everybody together. And I consider myself quite fortunate because I tell you this, I have a cousin who lives back home. I'm from Jamaica, and it was about 3, 4 years ago. It was before the pandemic. I was at rehearsal and I left to get some chow. And on my way back, I got a call from her, and she said, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm downtown. I'm going back to the theater because I have rehearsal." And she said, "You're always talking about rehearsal and plays and films, you know, from the time you were a little boy. I wonder how come my baby cousin isn't rich." And I said, "I am rich." And she said, "But I've never seen any money, seen any money." I said, "I'm rich because I have people, okay? I have relationships. And one of the relationships was born that I have with this place right now is that I know Dr. Rock, and she has created content for me to work as an artist. And she asked me to direct a show that she's wanted to tour, and I asked her, "You could have picked any number of people. Why did you pick me?" And you know, playing up on my ego, she said, "Because you're good." No, you're very good. Yeah, that works, okay? I can't tell a lie. I love my ego to be massaged. I'm just telling you right now, you know. So just keep it coming, and and as long as I'm being paid, I'm happy about that. But it's, you know, my history with this place is that one of the first plays I saw when I came here back in the 80s was at Channing Players. Now, who remembers Channing Players? See? Yeah. Well, you people have been around a long time. Yeah. So when you see the password for the Wi-Fi here and it says Channing, just remember there was a theater company here. It was they used to do some pretty decent work, as a matter of fact, because one of my professors uh, would they would ask us to come and see the shows and make sure we get a program for it to be signed. And I forgot my program at home, and the professor said, "Mr. Wilkes, you don't have to worry. I know you went to see the show," because he knew that I love theater so much. I see maybe 2 or 3 plays every week, and sometimes I get the industry rate, sometimes I don't, but I still try to sneak in and see a show. I saw 3 shows last weekend. That's because I love theater. Growing up, um, where I come from, we didn't have electricity, we didn't have running water in the house. We didn't have, you know, we toted our water um, from what we call a standpipe, which was a couple of miles away. You know, when I go back to Jamaica and I walk through the little village I grew up, I get to places like that. But when I was a kid, it took a couple of years, it seemed, you know. And you know, one of the things that always baffled me is that if I did something untoward out on the main road, by the time I got home, I was getting another spanking, and I couldn't figure out how my grandparents knew about my discretions. You know, but somehow the news got home before I did. As Dr. Rock mentioned in her eloquent introduction, I am a board member for Faith to Black. It's a nonprofit run by Shabak Enterprises. I think we started back in 2007. If I wasn't very good at math in school, that's why I became a theater major. I figured if I were ever to get rich, I'll hire an accountant to count my money, or just keep it underneath my bed or my pillow or something. Anyway, we're going into our 11th year, and we open this Thursday. And what it is a festival of 10-minute plays written by Black and African American playwrights from all over the country. As a matter of fact, we've gotten plays from Mexico. We got one from Australia once. We couldn't use them because they were outside of the parameters that we set up. You have to write a 10-minute play. Now, to some people, and I've heard Denise O'Neill, who's the founder and executive director, I've heard her say, how hard can it be to write a 10-minute play? It's hard. I consider myself a more than reasonably intelligent person, and I've never written a play. Now, I could tell you a good play from a bad play. If you bring a play to me, I could, okay, this isn't going to work, this will work, because I decided that since I was given the talent to direct, I will do that and then let the geniuses write the plays. So yeah, the plays that we got from, we always tell people, don't write musicals. Don't write, try to keep it with a one set play. Many years ago, this young lady sent me a play, and I read it, and I called her up, and I said, so you must have a couple $1 million as a budget. Said, what do you mean? I said, well, you started off in the church where this guy runs through the sermon while the sermon is going on, and 2 pages later, he ends up in somebody's living room, and 3 pages later in a basketball court. How do you plan to do that? Huh? I said, well, okay, you need to go back and find out how you're going to do some of those things. And I started doing this. When people send me plays to read, I read them, and then I see somebody else getting the job to direct it. So what I did was I started monetizing. I said, if I'm going to read your play, it's $200, and I'll give you a 30-minute consult. Anything over that, it's $25 for the first 15 minutes, okay? And magically, people stop sending me plays. But seriously, if somebody send you a play, you think, and they know my job is as a director. I'm thinking they're sending it to me because they want to engage me, you know. So I have to think about that. Anyway, but back to Shabak and Fade to Black. We started out at a little theater over in the Heights called the Obsidian Theater. It held about 60, 70 seats. And we did so well the first 2 years that we had to move. We went out to Queensborough Theater, and they were still nailing and painting when we moved in. And it came to a point where they thought that we weren't going to be able to do the shows because they didn't have the permits signed off and so forth. But at the very last hour, everything worked out. But here's what happened. Whenever I didn't know this at first, but the bathrooms, when we had so many people there and people kept flushing, there's an outer area where the wastewater goes away, and there's a pump underneath there. But because nobody had been flushing the bathrooms, the sawdust and all that kind of stuff was out there, so the water kept backing up into the theater. Exactly. So somebody went and got kitty litter, and they started, yeah, they went all over and they started spraying, and that's what helped to, but all of us were tiptoeing through. Yeah, and so we got through that. So we've been through a lot of turmoil, but through it all, we've last year we had over 200. The first year we did this, we had 36 plays that came in, and one of the funniest things that happened about it is that you have to prove that you're black, and this lady sent a play in, and I mean, she looked whiter than this paper, okay? But she identified as black. So I was the one who was supposed to direct her play. And I called her up, and the first couple of words, she said, "You're Jamaican." And I said, "Yes, how do you know?" She said, "My dad was Jamaican." What happened with her, she didn't find out she was black until her dad died when she was like in her 50s. Yes. What happened was back in the day, when people were coming to America from the West Indies or from anywhere, the government man who meets you decided what race you were. He'd look at you and say, "Okay, you're white, you're black, yeah." And so her dad was a light-skinned black man, and they looked at him and checked off white. So he looked at it and said, "Ah," and then he said, "I'm just going to roll with this." So and she said her mom had to have been in it too because her mom is Italian. And back then the Italian and the black people weren't really jiving, okay? So, and what was really funny about her story was, in fact, she wrote it in a play and she wants me to direct it. She said, when she was in college, she always just dated black guys. And her parents were really cool with that. And she said, "Man, I got the best parents in the world." Not one time did they say, "Oh, what's going on here?" Anyway, when it was after Pops passed, they're looking through his birth certificate, through his paperwork, and found his birth certificate. It had Negro on it because back then, in fact, my Jamaican passport identifies me as a Negro. And since I've been in this country, I've been a lot of different things. Come to think of it, Negro, Afro-American, colored, African-American. So now I just check, when I see it, I said, I cross out this black in big bold letters. By the way, there was some debate amongst the judges whether or not we should, and I said, "Listen, I talked to the lady, she's black, we're gonna do her play." So that's how that started. Anyway, we are going into our 11th year. We start tech rehearsals tomorrow. And if any of you have ever been in theater, you know how nerve-wracking tech is, especially when you're doing 10 different plays, 10 different directors who have strong egos. No, 9. I'm the only one that doesn't have that kind of ego. Let me make it clear. Stop it. I see. I can read subtext. Okay. So, all right, and I'm being told that time is of the essence here. So I just want to invite everybody to come out to see Fade to Black. Fade to Black ties in with everything that we're doing now because most of the plays that you see um, indicate something of the black experience and how that filters into our society as a whole. I I say this to you today that the only way we could become one nation under God, indivisible, what's the rest of it? Exactly, is if we learn about each other. We come from, in Jamaica, our motto is out of many one people. We have Indian, Chinese, everybody mixed up like gumbo, okay? So take a chance to learn something about the other guy. Just because you look at two people might be homogenous to you, one is from Hungary, one from other place, they have no idea what the other guy's culture is, black, white, or purple. So that's why Faith of Black came about, for us to give something to the community. Now, in 2025, June of 2025, we're going to have a big arts festival here, and Denise O'Neill, our executive director, is the visionary behind that, and we are pleading to folk. It's going to be big for our city. My hometown, my adopted hometown, Houston, Texas. Give it up for Houston. Yes, I love Houston, and I want us to be on the forefront of everything. You know, we have great restaurants here, as you can tell. Um, we have a lot of James Beard winners that came out of Houston. So we have everything to offer here, and we want to bring people from all over the world, all over the nation, to come and visit our city in 2025. So pass the word along. Fate to Black comes up the 22nd through the 24th of this month over at Match, not far from here, um, that way, Match on Main Street. And it's going to be in Matchbox 4. And it's faithtoblackfest.com. Faithtoblackfest.com. You could get that from Dr. Rock. And I'm willing to field questions before we leave because I don't know how much more time we have, and I wouldn't want to leave without entertaining a couple of questions that I'm sure you have for me. I'll go with you. Yes.
This is superficial, but where do they make good jerk chicken?
Where my sister does, well, no, not her. My sister's husband makes the best, but Cool Runnings, and that's not superficial, by the way. Cool Runnings makes a decent jerk chicken. Yeah. I don't do much jerk anymore because I live in a flat, and they scream at us if we use the grill out front. But it has to, jerk chicken has to be done over a very slow fire for the meats to cook in and inside. You could tell I love cooking, but equally I love eating a lot more than that, you know. So I prefer somebody else does. But yes, Cool Runnings on West Belfort between Fondren and Gessner, I'd say. Yeah, Cool Runnings, like the movie. And that's not superficial. I'll be right with you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Why is it important to have a festival that's centered around black playwrights?
Well, because black playwrights and women playwrights have been underserved for so long. Um, Many years ago, when Raising the Sun came, that was the first time that a play was done on Broadway written by an African American. And it took another 70 years almost before an African American female got her play up there. But yes, they have play festivals here in Houston. In fact, Scriptwriters has one, the 10-minute play festival. But the black writer has been very underserved. Now, you have to be black to write the play, but the directors are from all different races. If you look at our website, you'll see that our directors are very diverse. And it's good. It's a good exercise for a writer to have someone else direct their play so that they could get a perspective of what they wrote. Because, and I always tell, whenever I talk to students, I always tell them, don't fall in love with what you wrote. Because by the time it gets on stage, it's going to go through revisions. And I could read a play and tell you if you ever did a workshop on it. Workshopping means sitting around and letting some actors read what you wrote so you could listen to it. I could tell from the first syllable. You know, first you see the typos. No, with your play, you know, and I'm okay. I could be brutal, not on. I'm trying to learn the facility for tact, but it's very difficult. So, yes, sir.
My question is, as the director, do you have a limit to miss a play 10 minutes that may run longer than 10 minutes? And if you do you consult with the script writer to make sure that you don't lose the intent or the theme of the script writer?
That's a very good question. That happens sometime. One of the biggest fights that I have with Denise every year is when she said, your play went over by 2 minutes. I said, so? there was nothing else I could cut. As a rule, I never touch a writer's play. I call them up. Well, I can't call up Pearl Cleage and ask her to cut her play because you're not going to make it any better. Yeah, but there are times when the judges find a play that they think is has something important to say, and they'll call the writer and say, "Look, your play is over by a certain limit. Can you find a way to cut it down, and we'll be happy to stage it." And we do all these 10 plays. We do full productions of the 10 plays with sets and so forth. Yes. And another reason why I think it's unfair, unprofessional, and downright rude is when somebody, like I go see, when I'm directing a show and one of the young people, especially on the college level, they will say a line, and I said, that's not the line. But it sounds better, Mr. No, you're not a better writer than August Wilson. You, okay? First of all, you don't know. Remember earlier I said that I've never written a play? Do you know why? It's hard. Were it easy, I'd be able to do it. Okay? So you don't know if that person sat there one evening sitting over their typewriter. People don't use typewriters anymore, do you? Word processor? No. Whatever. No. How long it took them to come up with that one word? It may have been 2 weeks. They've gone on. Edward Albee, he was the theater, what do you call that? Artist in residence over at Texas Southern. At U of H. And when I was in college at Texas Southern, he did a guest lecture over at Texas Southern. And one of his plays, one of my favorite plays of his, is The Zoo Story. And I remember my professor and I, Dr. Pollard, were going back and forth about what that play really means. And basically, it's about this guy who was a real coward. He wanted to kill himself, but he didn't have the guts to do it. So he goes and he aggravates this man until the man stabs him, okay? So when Edward Albee is sitting there, and he finishes, and I said, Mr. Albee, call me Edward. No, Mr. Albee. Hey, in Jamaica, we say, I have autopsy. I say Mr. and Miss, okay? And doctor. Anyway, I said, what is the Zoo Story about? He said, what do you think it was about? And I told him what I just told you. It was about this coward who wanted to kill himself. And he said, that's what it's about. And then my follow-up story, how long did it take you to write that? And his answer threw us off because he said, I had that play in my head for about 2 years. And one night, I sat down and got stoned and wrote it. Now, we expected to come up with something intellectual, okay? This guy got high and wrote the play. That's it? Okay, I want to thank, I'm sure there are a lot more questions you have, but since you're so shy and since we have limited time, I just want to thank you very much from the bottom of my heart for allowing us to talk to you today. It's faithblackfest.com, and if you write a letter to Denise O'Neill, let her know that you are willing to come and volunteer or do whatever. But come out and see these shows because they have a lot to say. And we're not thematic. We don't tell people what to write. You write whatever you want to write, as long as it stays within the 10-minute format. And we'll do it. We'll put the show on. Okay? The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. And before you think that I'm not brilliant, I borrowed that from Robert Frost.
Thank you so much, Errol Anthony Wilkes. And I do want to remind everybody that the Fade to Black Festival is next weekend from the 22nd to the 24th at Match. And then in 2025, July of 2025, the Houston Black Arts Festival, sponsored and put on by Shabak Enterprises and Fade to Black, will be happening.